Okay, so I do neurosurgery. So we operate on the brain, the spinal cord, and peripheral nerves. I specialize in functional neurosurgery, so I treat patients who have movement disorders such as Parkinson's disease, essential tremor. We put electrodes in their brain and we treat the tremors. I also treat patients who have epilepsy, which is a dysfunction of the brain, and we remove those parts of the brain, or treat them with now stimulation or other kinds of treatments. We also treat patients who have chronic pain with stimulation or with ablative techniques. Then I also do a lot of surgeries for brain tumors, aneurysms, and also spinal cord type problems. It's enjoyable when patients have good outcomes. Stressful when patients don't have good outcomes. It happens to everybody. And if you're a doctor and you've never had a bad outcome, it's because you don't do that much doctoring. Because people eventually become sick, and there's, for whatever reason, nothing that you can do, but you do the best that you can. And it's a good feeling when patients have good outcome. Usually it sort of recharges the battery and gets you ready for the next adventures. The hardest part of the job is really, I think, having discussions with patients about their prognosis, if it's a bad prognosis. Mm-hmm. And when patients are, not doing well, if the patient comes in with a terrible bleed in the brain and we know that they're comatose and they're probably not going to survive this, talking with the families, about the patient. And, it's difficult. People obviously don't live forever. Somebody dies at some point, but we're often at that juncture in, that patient's life and family members that are going through it. And, having that discussion is, I think, difficult. So in high school, there was a board when we were seniors that, we were sort of supposed to sign up or write down what we expected from a career path perspective. And so I chose actually neurosurgery at that time. I took biology. I remember hearing about the visual pathways in the brain, and I couldn't help but stop imagining in my mind how vision is actually being incorporated in the brain and how we interpret that and how that's going through, our eyeballs into our brain. And somehow this is like working. I thought that the brain is, one of the most remarkable organs in the universe. It's made up of 100 billion neurons in the adult brain. In kids, it's actually 200 billion neurons, so you lose about half of your nerve cells by the time you get old. So you use them while you're young. And, but it's the same number of neurons, or the same number of cells that would be stars in the Milky Way galaxy, 100 billion. And each one of those nerve cells has about 10,000 connections, plus probably some other versions of communication. So it's like, if you imagine 100 billion times 10,000 is the number of discussions going on in your nervous system at a given time. And what's even more remarkable about that is within that myriad of nerve cells, you can control with your own consciousness one nerve cell at a given time. Technology is really rapidly evolving, especially as it relates to devices and software. I'm actually creating a lot of software that helps us with localization in the operating room, writing my own math and code and trying to figure all those pieces out. So it's actually, kind of a fun time, I think, in medicine. We're definitely like in the industrial revolution of medicine. There's also the biological revolution, trying to come up with these viral vectors and pharmaceuticals that will change the way our biochemistry works and that kind of thing. But also kind of integrating computers with the body. Imagine a quadriplegic patient who now has a chip implanted in their brain that's attached to a robotic arm, and then they can feed themselves all using their mind without any other physical part. So that whole brain-computer interface field is actually starting to take off. You'll be able to surf the internet using your brainwaves. But yeah, I mean, there will be some real advantages if somebody loses their arm. Can have a mechanical arm. It's very much like Star Wars. It's actually happening right now. Probably in the next 10 to 20 years, that'll happen. There will probably continue to be this industrial revolution where we'll have devices. Eventually, biologics will take over where you can regrow an arm or something like that. But I would imagine we're still probably like 50 or 100 years away from that. But it's actually all happening, believe it or not. It sounds crazy, but it's actually happening. Malpractice is always a part of medicine, but it's not fortunately that common. I would say for most surgeons, probably, it's rare, once every 5 years or something like that. But I mean, it's always something that lingers. I mean, in medicine, unfortunately, in the Western world, it's a problem. We all try to do, I think, the right thing for the most part. I mean, there are some malicious doctors out there, but it's all rare from that perspective. But because of the whole malpractice problem in the Western world, we all document things in a way where we kind of preempt it, we're thinking about it, we try to do things that prevent us from being susceptible to a problem in the future. But I think most of us try not to think about it too much. We just try to do the right thing.
Okay, so a little background on this question. As you know, becoming a doctor requires a minimum of 20 years of education and practice, and because of this, the term burnt out gets thrown around a lot. People get tired of the practice because of long hours and multiple shifts, and I guess I have to say that, although I really want to be a doctor, I'm afraid at some point I will get burnt out and not like the profession anymore.
Burnout is sort of a big topic. I think what's important for the most part for people choosing a career is not necessarily to worry about that, but to really be sure that they choose a career that they enjoy and that they feel like they're making a difference and contributing to, and all those kinds of things. Because I think at the end of the day, many people probably spend more than 80 hours a week on Facebook and on their cell phone, and the reason they do that is because they enjoy it. And if you enjoy being a doctor, you're not going to really think about those 80 hours per se. You're going to sort of enjoy the work that you do. Burnout is a problem related to in part people not enjoying the work that they do. Being in over demand for work that they're perhaps good at, or being under appreciated for what they do. If you do the best job in the world at something, then everybody's giving it to you every day, and you can never go home. You might be okay with it. You might be like Tesla, sitting in a basement all day and all night and developing stuff, and you're happy doing that. But if you don't enjoy it, and people aren't appreciating the fact that you're actually doing this stuff, it just kind of gets tiring, I guess, after a while. A lot of us like to have positive reinforcement, and a lot of us want to have a lack of negative reinforcement. Unfortunately, just like we in school have, usually we get a lot of negative reinforcement and we get very little positive reinforcement. And that whole paradigm, I think, needs a switch.